perspective, I have with me my co-hosts, my co-mug leaders, Natalie Kerber from Atumos and Jackie Potts from BombBomb. Hi, hello everyone. Wave. Look at those beautiful people. Go to the next slide. By law, we are required to, oh wait, no, that's not what this is. This is the Adobe Marketo Engage User Group House Rules. Basically, no self-promo, no pitching, no sales. That's not what this is about. This is a user group, a community for us to help each other, to talk about being users of Marketo, not a place for prospecting, not a place for selling. Don't contact people outside of this group without their consent. If people talk about things here regarding their use case of Marketo or something going on with their work, please do not share that information without their consent. Be a nice person, don't be a jerk, just be a human. That's it, those are the rules. And by law, we are required to let you know that we are recording this meeting, the North America Mug meeting on January 25th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Actually, it's 12 o'clock. It's 12 o'clock Eastern time. We will be recording this and posting it on the Marketo User Group YouTube channel. If you do not wish to participate in a live recorded session, then you should go ahead and drop now, but we will record this for you, and the recording will be sent out to anyone who registered today. You can see that you are in a Zoom room, not a Zoom webinar. So the recording may or may not show your face or your name. And if that's not something you're comfortable with, then see ya. It was nice to have you. Watch the recording later. And you are probably already signed up for this because you're here today, but just in case you're not and you found us some other way, make sure you are registered on mugs.marketo.com. You can join the North America Virtual Mug there. You just create an account using the email address that you used to log into Marketo or the Marketo community, and then you'll get notifications in the future anytime we have a new event. And Adobe Summit. Summit is back, IRL. Large and in charge, in person in Las Vegas, March 19th to the 23rd. If you would like to register, go to summit.adobe.com. I think there's still some early bird discounts going on. And probably if you talk to your CSM or something, they might have a discount code too. I don't know, they usually do. That's just unsolicited advice. Summit's going to be cool. I hope that you go. There's going to be cool sessions. Everyone that goes always loves it. You're going to learn about other Adobe stuff. You're going to meet people. You're going to party down in Vegas. There will probably be a concert of some form. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be dope. So register for Summit. Everyone should go. And some other mugs going on. We are already at the 25th, so you can hit up the Seattle Virtual Mug tomorrow if you like, but otherwise check out all these other mugs that are meeting regularly and see what other meetings they have coming up soon. There's lots of virtual meetings happening now. You know, in these new uncertain times, we are still doing virtual meetings sometimes, so that's great. You can check out other topics people are doing. Raleigh Mugs meeting, London Mug, New York Mug, Chicago Mug, Manufacturing Mug. There's Champion office hours happening, I think, once a month. But those are all cool. Check them out on Bevy, join all the different stuff, and you'll get notifications for it. And you can join this other thing by scanning this QR code called Better Together chapter for Adobe Experience Cloud across different user group programs. So this is for people that use more than one Adobe product and want to talk to other people that use more than one Adobe product. So if you are a Marketo and Adobe Marketo Engage and person, then go do that. And if you want to make a cool 25 bucks in a gift card for 10 minutes of your time, not a bad ROI if you ask me, you can go review Adobe Marketo Engage on G2 Crowd. It will take you 10 minutes. You got to do it before Tuesday. You can be anonymous or not, so you can really let it rip. And then you get a $25 gift card when your review is published. I don't know where the gift card is to, but I'm sure it's Amazon. There are now many different tests you can pay to take for Adobe Marketo Engage. There is the artist formerly known as the Marketo Certified Associate is now the Adobe Certified Professional for Adobe Marketo Engage. For people that are newer to using Marketo, there's the Adobe Certified Expert Adobe Marketo Engage Business Practitioner, if you would like to have even more letters in the acronym about your certification. This is the artist formerly known as the Marketo Certified Expert. And now there's a brand spanking new one called the Adobe Certified Master Adobe Marketo Engage Architect, which is the artist sort of formerly known as the Marketo Certified Solutions Architect, which used to just be available to partners and now is available to anyone. So that's big, exciting news. Go to this website right here so you can learn more information about how to take the tests and look at the exam guides. Super great. If you have not been certified before, it's a really good thing for exposure for you and for your career, and just to kind of establish yourself as an expert, especially if you're looking for a job right now or just looking to level up your expertise. And you know what? If you are not looking for a job right now, you should definitely get your company to pay for this, because I'm sure you have some sort of professional development budget laying around, and this is exactly what it's for.
And as Veronica just pointed out in the chat, you can now renew your certification for free. So we'll drop the link in there too. That was just happened a couple days ago. So there it is. Thanks, Jackie.
That's very exciting.
So be sure to check that out.
It's a good reason, once you do the certification the first time, to not let it expire, because if it's not expired, you can take it again for free to re-up. If it does expire though, you have to pay again, and that is where I am. So RIP to me.
Also unproctored for the recertification, which I know for anyone who's done it before understands how great that is.
Recertification.
Yes.
That is exciting news.
That is the best part. So
that is the best part. All right, what's next? Awesome. Okay, and our speakers, the best part, why we are all here today, not to hear me talk about boring stuff, but to hear from these amazing experts about actual cool Marketo stuff, super relevant to what you're doing. So do you want me to introduce all of them? No? Yeah?
Just give it's a quick high level.
Okay, cool. I really should have made sure I knew how to pronounce all of your names before we got started with this, but here we go. YOLO. We have Jen Keeler, Senior Marketing Operations Manager at F5, is going to talk about the common pitfalls tracking the lifecycle journey in Marketo. Who has not experienced a pitfall there? No one on this call, I'll tell you that much. We have Raven McFarland, Senior Campaign Operations Consultant from Atumos, talking about navigating your static and smart lists more efficiently with list views. We have Veronica, whose last name I'm very sorry, I am not going to try to pronounce, it will be bad. But she's from a very cool tiny island in Spain, I do know that much. She's a marketing operations lead at Alma, and she's going to talk to us about Marketo program templates, where you can find them and how to use them. Lauren Posendek, whose name I'm also probably, I said it right. Okay, great. I've actually been saying it wrong my whole life until like 2 weeks ago. I learned it's actually Posendek. So Lauren Posendek is Principal Marketing Platform Operations Manager at Expel, and is going to talk about how to make interesting moments truly interesting at scale. And then we have Amit Jain, co-founder and CEO of Event Iron India Private Limited, streamlining Marketo and Salesforce integrations. 5 tips for streamlining your Marketo and Salesforce integration. So super excited to have everyone here today. As you can see, our topics really range from super beginner to a little bit more advanced. There'll be a little bit something here for everybody. These are going to be some quick hits on exciting new stuff. So let's get right to it.
All right, is that my cue?
I think so. Go for it, Jen. Take it away.
All right, cool. So I have talked about Lifecycle here before, as well as maybe some other mugs, so you might have seen me. But if you haven't, you can definitely make sure to, just Google search for it, and you can watch some videos that get into more of the nitty gritty about Lifecycle. But today I'm going to talk about maybe some of the 4 more common pitfalls that I've seen in my time doing Lifecycle. I say pitfalls, but it's more like grievances I have with the Lifecycle process. So we can hopefully maybe all commiserate a little bit together. So just before we get started, I wanted to just touch on the 4 topics that we'll be talking about. So grab a pen and paper, mark which ones you want to come back to. And if you want to tune out at any point, feel free. The first one is just straight up, you have too many stages. Like you just have way too many life cycle stages. That's something that I see a lot. Combining metrics that don't make sense. And if that doesn't make sense, we'll get into the nitty gritty of that in a couple more slides. relying too heavily on MQL metrics. I think this is the one that grinds my gears maybe the most out of all of these. And the last one is just legit not understanding the data. And we'll talk about what that means to me as we go through this. So first of all, too many stages. It means what it says. I think a lot of people, when they are looking at a super simplified life cycle, they're saying, well, how can we track when this happens, when that happens, yada, yada, yada. And so eventually it snowballs into this process that's just like, well, why don't we create a life cycle stage for it? And then eventually you're looking at it and you're just like, we have like 500 life cycle stages. How am I able to take that data and pull it back up so I can actually track the life cycle journey? Because if you have so many, you just keep getting stuck in these little granular data pieces that end up making you look like Charlie from It's Always Sunny over here, where you just have pieces of paper and lines connecting and you're trying to figure stuff out. You can't actually see what's happening. And you're really limiting yourself there because you can't see what the actual journey looks like. You're getting more data about the stage to stage stuff than you are about when someone comes into your database to the time they're ready to hand over your money. So that's something to think about. As always, one of my mantras is like, keep it simple. It's actually really difficult to build something simply, especially in Marketo with all that you can do. But as much as possible, it's important to keep things as simple as you can. Combining metrics. And this is another reason to try and keep things simple, because the issue with this is that you need to be able to slice and dice your data. And what I mean by that is something that I see a lot is when people go into their channels. And so for our example here, I'm looking at a webinar channel, and you have your standard invited, registered, attended statuses, but ultimately someone's going to say, well, how many of those people turned into MQLs? And a lot of the initial responses are, oh, we'll just add MQL, SAL, lifecycle statuses to these channels. And what happens there is you're kind of cross-pollinating the data and once again, limiting yourself to being able to analyze what's actually happening. Instead, what you want to do is keep your channel statuses to that channel and pivot off some other type of data. So for example, if you want to track meetings set, pull in that field. If you want to track MQLs, you can pull in that field and then figure out how that looks like, compared to all of your programs, because ultimately multiple touches are what generate MQLs. And if you're doing it this way, you're only looking at that single touch and any MQL in your database that might have happened to touch that MQL. It's not giving you the full picture. And I guess, based on what I've said so far, one of my big things is like, you gotta back up and look at the full picture, else you're never going to get anywhere. And again, like when you're looking at success of your channels, it's not MQLs generated necessarily, sales, stages. You want to see, did people attend to the webinar? Did they register? Did they follow up with us after that? That's going to be the channel's success, not whether or not they converted to MQL. That's what's going to tell you if you should be doing more of that initiative. Relying on MQLs, I could probably talk about this for 20 minutes, but we have a lot of cool topics to get to, so I'll try not to bore you too much. My issue with MQLs in general is that, to me, I feel like the way I've seen companies use them is that ultimately they've kind of become a vanity metric. And what I mean by that is that they can still be useful, and they should still be useful for identifying whether or not the people coming into your database meet certain BANT qualifiers. Like, are they the right job role? Are they the right just company that we want to target? Is that correct? Are we accumulating the right number of leads that we can pass over to sales? However, how I see them used is sometimes, I think we've all been approached by that person in our company that's like, oh, my team's not getting enough MQLs. Can we just maybe lower the MQL threshold a little bit? Maybe we give them 40 points for opening an email, and then suddenly we got all these MQLs that sales can work. And at the end of the day, if you can easily manipulate that number, it makes it really hard to action off whether or not it's meaningful or not. And then you're not making maybe the right decisions. So I think instead, maybe some metrics that you should be looking at are meeting set. You can't fudge that number. I mean, I guess if you tried really hard, you probably could, but people are either setting meetings with you or they're not. you're either creating opportunities or you're not. And something that would be better here would be the actual stage conversion between an MQL to like an SAL or an SQL or something like that, because you can actually glean information from that. So for example, if you see that, you're sending 3,000 MQLs over to sales and they're only, qualifying 20 of them, you can ask yourself, are we qualifying the right number of leads? Or something that never happens, are we sending over too many MQLs to sales? Or are they just straight up not, following the SLA, which is something to follow up on? So those are the type of questions you can answer by looking at stage conversion that you can't get just by looking at like the raw number of MQLs coming in. And finally, there's also this one that's just not understanding the data. And I think we've all been here, or, our stakeholders, especially because they're not in it as much, don't necessarily understand what they're looking at. And I like to preface this by saying, like, it's generally not anyone's fault. It's just an experience. Like, you're in the system, you've done this so many times. I know I personally did not have, and you can see my origin story in my other presentations. I didn't have the greatest foundation for Lifecycle when I first had to start doing it. And I was pulling in bad practices from colleagues, superiors, et cetera, who were focused on things like raw MQLs, raw SALs, things like that, and weren't actually looking at the data that matters. So what I like to tell people is, like, you really just have to go out and educate yourself. And the way that I do that as an art major who hates math, I have found a bunch of resources that will calculate things for me. So like basic statistics and significance, understanding how that works has helped me a lot, but I really hate doing it. So there are websites out there where you can just go and enter in your numbers, and it'll tell you whether or not that's something you can make a decision off of or not. And lots of resources like that. Some of them, I think you might have to pay for them, unfortunately, but they might even tell you why based on the numbers that come back, which is really valuable. But ultimately, what you want to do is just, we need to learn what insights actually have impact. What can we actually action on based off of this information that we have available to us? Is it reliable? That's something that pops up a lot. I feel like we're all dealing with dirty databases in a number of ways. So maybe we have to put an asterisk on the reports that we're pulling, like some type of caveat, like, here's the information that we got from this report. Here are some ways that we can action on it. And that might be impacted by the fact we may or may not have certain data for a certain time, something like that. But, at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. We all work for different companies. They all have different ways of measuring things and reporting on things and talking about things. And as long as you kind of understand what you need to do and maybe some ways that you can break the system and help educate other people, then, at the end of the day, you're good to go. And you got to roll with the punches. And that's about it.
Awesome. I think I'll go next. Those were really great tips from Jen. I'll share my screen and start talking about Marketo program templates. I feel like these are some sort of best kept secrets because not so many people know about them. I wish someone told me about this when I started, would have saved me a ton of time. Templates are great when you kickstart an instance or just, kickstart a program. I mean, this is what Marketo is all about, using those templates. And there is a library with around 80 pre-built programs. And they are all built by Marketo as a best practice. And today I want to show you where you can find them. So I'm just heading here to my demo instance. And if you click on this new drop down, you will see you can import a program that opens a pop-up. And you can here choose Marketo program library. And what this does is gets another drop down with a lot of programs. So a little bit on the naming convention here, BP, best practice. This is an email send, live event, nurture, online advertising, trade show, webinar, web content. So you can find any use case. most likely. Landing page is down here. So once you found the program you want to import, you can just choose it. So let's choose one. What should we choose? I'll choose a webinar. All right. I'll just hit next. And then I have to choose which campaign folder I want this program to be created in. So I'll just scroll down to my mock demo folder here. There are some tags attached to this instance. It's a demo instance, so I'll just go ahead and choose these ones, and then I'll click next. And here there are some conflict details related to program tags. So if this program to be imported has new tags that don't exist in your Marketo instance, then they will be created. If this program has landing pages, the landing page templates will be imported. Images, the same, and emails, the same. So the email templates will be created in the instance. So you will probably have to go in and edit those templates. They are not, on your brand. They are on a Marketo example. So we're going to see how that looks like. But I'll leave it to default conflict rules. If I would uncheck this box, then you can choose different settings here. Let's leave it to this and then hit next. So this is a summary of the program name. What's the description? So I can see that I'll import a webinar program. There are 3 invitation emails, reminders, follow-ups, and other things from the conflict resolution. So I'll just hit import. And this will open this pop-up here that will show me the progress, pretty much the same when you import a list. And when I'm importing this, the program that I'm importing will have all the campaigns off. So no need to worry. You can customize it however you wish. So you can add additional filters to those smart campaigns. You can add different flow steps. You can change tokens. This webinar program I'm importing has a lot of tokens, and those can be edited. So it's a great way to jumpstart this webinar program if you don't have already one. I feel like this is going to take a while. So I think I've done an import before. Yes, there are some programs here. Same like this one, imported programs. I just wanted to show you how it looks like. You will have campaigns and local assets. So all these emails will come with the program. You will have a registration form. You will have the registration landing page, thank you page. You will have even a list import and reports, suggested reports. Here you will have the campaigns to process the registrations, send the invitation. So basically, it's giving you a lot to think about when you're building your webinar, to know what type of assets you will need, what type of actions you will need. And then, of course, you can go into each of these. I like that they are, in a certain order. It makes sense. I don't have to think about that. And then all of these here can be edited. So you can take out if there's something you don't need. You can add things, so fully editable. And of course, you can rename the program to what makes sense in your instance. So I use this today when I need to build something new. I check out the library first, I import the template, then I customize it, and I find that very useful. That's it. This is still not imported, but we're not going to wait.
We can check back at the end and see how it went. We can go ahead and turn it over to Raven, who will talk about the list views next.
Awesome. All right. I think everyone can see that now. Hello. Hi, all. Raven McFarland. I'm a senior campaign operations consultant. I spend a lot of my time executing campaign operations. So if you ever just want someone to chat with too about just like venting or just frustrations, I'm here for that. I live and breathe it. But for today, I'm hoping to make your lives a little bit easier by talking about a functionality in Marketo that I think is overlooked. And I think it's overlooked because the functionality is limited. Let's get into it. Those are called list views. So I'm going to cover what a list view is, where you can use them, how you create them. And I have a couple examples of the ways that I've used them in a couple different scenarios. Key takeaways that you should consider when you're trying to work with list views, and then try to help us out on to vote for some expanded functionality. Who knows if anyone will see it, but we can still keep voting. So what is a list view? A list view ultimately is a pre-configured display of columns, which ultimately are the fields on your lead records in Marketo, for records who are a member of specific Marketo assets. So as you see on the screen here, exactly where that arrow is, that's where you'll find list views. List views can be used on any program membership. So default programs, email send programs, or event programs. And then they can also be used on static list and smart list. So not everywhere, but can definitely provide some value to you. Here's a couple examples of how you go about creating those and getting some insights. So you'll first want to navigate to the asset in question containing the records that you want to pull a quick glance for. To do that, visit the program or the static list or smart list. And then at the top of that navigation bar, look for this view here. It says view default. That'll drop down to give you two options. It'll allow you to edit your default view, which is what will appear anytime you navigate to an asset that has a list view. And it'll also show you any of the list views that you've already created and give you the option to create a new one. Whether you start with editing your default or you create a new view ultimately depends on what you're trying to see and where you need to get that information. So just keep that in mind. But ultimately, once you go into either create view or edit view, the second little pop-up screen will appear where you can define a name, and then you can start adding hidden columns or fields into your view, aka visible columns. Now, it can be, like I said, it's limited functionality, so it can be a little tedious to do. So some things that I try to keep in mind when editing my views is using Control on PC or Command on Mac to select multiple fields or columns at once. So I can, all at once get rid of the fields I don't have any interest in viewing, and then pull in the ones that I do care about. When you're attempting to reorder the columns, you unfortunately can't, select a visible column and then just move it up or move it down like you would in email template module. So unfortunately, you have to remove the field from that visible columns field and then add it in the order that you desire. And that is where using the multi-select option really does some favors. So just some things to keep in mind too as you try to create new views and edit your views. Some examples of ways that you can use list views to make your life easier and just a little more efficient. I use it for at a glance email performance reporting. So after an email send, if I have a stakeholder who wants to see quickly, which there's some debate around how quick you should be reviewing those results. Nonetheless, if they want some data, I have a way to see how many bounces did we get without having to look at an email performance report, and also being able to dive into the record in question and understand why that activity occurred. You can also use it for audience demographics if you're trying to understand or create a new audience segment that you're wanting to communicate with. Say the criteria that you've used in the past couple of sends isn't yielding the same amount of records, and you want to deep dive into why. Is that because of missing data? Is that because data values have changed? Well, a list view is a great way to get that at a glance view. Just pull in the fields that you would expect to have populated with specific field values and see what's really going on with those records. And in the same sense, you could also use that for data management audits. So let's say that you're working on a life cycle, you're testing out your new life cycle process, and you want to see if all of those records are hitting the date timestamps and the stages accordingly. If you pull in those fields to a view on that program level, you'd be able to see at a glance whether that was happening without having to review the results tab of a smart campaign. And it also, again, provides you that ability to look directly at the record. So 3 kind of examples of ways that you could use list views. like I said, there wasn't really too much with list views. So as I get to the end here, I'd love to encourage everybody to vote for this idea that was created back in 2016. It's still out there. I voted on it last week. But ultimately, list views are unshareable. They are unique to the user. And that would be a huge add in terms of efficiency. So once the presentation deck is shared out, click the link here and go vote for shareable list views. The more functionality we add to the feature, the more beneficial it becomes for all of us. So anything that you should take away from this presentation, little mini thing, is that keep in mind that you can use list views on smart lists, static lists, and program membership views. It's intended to provide at-a-glance insights for further reporting investigation. This shouldn't be your one and all sort of review. Views are personal. You cannot share these with other users, but go vote for our 2016 idea. Let's do it. And then when you're going to edit your views, just keep an eye out on which view you're editing. Anytime you navigate to that asset, like I mentioned, it's going to default. The display will be your default view. So if you're trying to edit another view, just make sure that you select that view to save yourself some time. And vote for shareable list views. Anyways, that's all I had for you. Thanks everybody for listening.
Awesome. That's so great. Lots of fans of shareable list views in the chat. So let's make it happen. Awesome. We're going to turn it over to Lauren next, who's going to share about interesting moments. Hello, everyone. I think you can all see that. Thank you, Zoom, for including the preview of that. Love it. Hi, I am Lauren Posendek. Today, I will be sharing tips and tricks for taking your interesting moments to the next level so that you can make them really interesting at scale, which is a big buzzword, but I promise this will help. So first, what are interesting moments? I think all of us on the call generally know what interesting moments are, but just to define them, they're Marketo-driven actions that are stamped on lead and contact records that help enable the revenue teams for targeted follow-up. Interesting moments are populated by Marketo and are available in the Marketo Sales Insight iframe within Salesforce. It's important to note that they're available to Marketo Sales Insight and Marketo Sales Connect customers only. Okay, so how do we create interesting moments? Interesting moments are used in batch or trigger smart campaign flows as their own flow action step. You can see in the screenshot here, you would drag over the interesting moment flow action into your smart campaign flow. The first tip I want to share with you all, which many of you may already know, but the type field for interesting moments is editable. It looks like a pick list with email, milestone, and web, but you can edit that type. I would recommend that you use unique values to group your interesting moments by type. Tip number 2, which we'll talk about in the next slide, would be to build your interesting moment smart campaigns with triggers to leverage your trigger tokens. You'll see here in the description, it says attended::trigger.name. We'll talk more about trigger tokens, what those mean, and how they display. Oh my gosh, sorry, it's going back and forth. Okay, so trigger tokens and interesting moments. Trigger tokens are a really great way to leverage the power of Marketo and scale your interesting moments. It took me a really long time to get on board with trigger tokens, mainly because I didn't understand them until I started using them. And once I use them, I really love them. So tip number 3 will be to explore other trigger tokens to include in interesting moments. It's hyperlinked in here. So once you get the slides, you can see this is also an Adobe page that you can reference. But in the screenshots here, we'll show the trigger, which is program status is changed. For the sake of clarity here, the program is just an event program for this mug, just as an example. The new program status is event attended. You'll see in the flow here, so the type is event, the description is attended::trigger.name. So that trigger.name token is going to take the name of the program or the constraint that triggered this specific smart campaign. So you'll see the result in the detail is event::attended: the name of the actual program, which in this case is the EV North America virtual mug. So here are some other examples for how you can use trigger tokens within interesting moments. Fills out form. So again, the trigger name is the actual name of the trigger that's triggering the smart campaign. Just the trigger.name is going to be that constraint or that action. And then the trigger web page will be the name of the web page that the person filled out that form. So if you're using global forms, this is a really great way to show your team what pages people are filling out forms on. So the result of this is fill out form, the name of the form with the name of the page that they filled the form on. Another example is visited web page. So again, the trigger of visited web page with the trigger name is going to be visit web page with the colon of the trigger name, which is that constraint, which is the URL of the web page that they're visiting. Program status is changed. This one I typically keep simple of just the trigger.name, which would be the program name. If you really want to up-level this, I don't have it in the slide, but happy to chat through it with anyone offline. We use operational smart lists with choices to determine if someone attended a webinar, no-showed a webinar, attended on demand, because then you could update that description to be attended : trigger name, no-show : trigger name. Last is probably the most controversial, interesting moment you could probably build with your teams would be clicks, link, and email, only because we all know that email clicks may not always be email clicks, but you do you and what works best for your business. Again, clicks, link, and email would be the trigger name with the colon of the name or the trigger.name, which is the email. It's important to note that when they're listing the email name, it's going to show the program too. So program naming conventions are really important in this. Tip number 4, which we'll talk about in the next slide, is to create a centralized interesting moments program to keep them all in one place. This is an example. This isn't ours in our instance, but this is an example of what a centralized interesting moments program could look like. Very, very simple. It would be a default program. If you have an operational channel within your Marketo instance, that's the channel I would assign to this. A campaigns folder. And then again, these are some smart campaigns based upon the last slide that you could build. For the forms, the constraint could be is any form, or it could say not contains unsubscribe. Depends on what forms you want to append interesting moments for. Same with events. Events, I would do program status is any, and the new status is attended or event attended, because then you know specifically that those are for events. And how interesting moments appear in Salesforce. I thought this was really important to show. Obviously, the Marketo side is what's driving them, but Salesforce is where a lot of that is going to end up, and that's how we're going to enable the team. So interesting moments are available on leads, contacts, and accounts in Salesforce. They're part of the Marketo Sales Insight package, and that package also installs a series of custom fields that you'll see in this screenshot. So tip number 5 would be to group the Marketo Sales Insight iframe and those fields together for your team so that they're not having to bounce around on these different layouts to find them. And tip number 6 would be to create Salesforce reports using these custom interesting moments fields to enable your revenue team. So we have a series of reports that are built, and we can group the reports by last interesting moment type. You can group it by last interesting moment date. You could, if you want the last interesting moment, the world is your oyster with these reports. So last slide to recap, the 6 tips. The field type is editable. Feel free to group them however you'd like. Tip number 2 is to build your smart campaigns with triggers to leverage trigger tokens. And then explore what other trigger tokens you can use in interesting moments. Tip number 4 is to keep your interesting moments centralized so that you don't have them in individual smart campaigns. Keep a central program. Tip number 5, to group them, the Marketo Sales Insight iframe and those custom fields together in Salesforce. And then tip number 6 would be to create Salesforce reports using those custom fields to enable your teams. And that's all I have.
Awesome. We'll turn it over then to our last presenter. I'm going to show the screen out. Amit, if you want to take it on from here.
Sure. Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everyone. This is Amit Jain, and I'm going to share quick 5 tips to streamline your Marketo and Salesforce integration. So when you have a really big database, and even though you don't really have big database, but you see, really that sync backlog where so many records are syncing back and forth, and you have to wait for hours and even days sometimes to have your MQLs and your updated data from Marketo syncing to Salesforce. So here are quick 5 tips how you can streamline that. So first one is to limit the number of records. So by that, I mean number of records. It's not just lead and contact, but also account, opportunity, and even custom object records. Why is that? Because there are certain limits on this Salesforce Marketo connector, how much data it can sync per hour per object. So you have to keep that in mind. If you have so much unnecessary data syncing back and forth, it will definitely hamper your sync backlog. So quick tip on how you can limit that, especially on lead and contact, and you can do the similar thing for other objects as well. You can ask Marketo support to enable a custom filter in this sync, and you can have something like saying sync to Marketo true or false. If the value is true, then only that record will be syncing back and forth. Otherwise, it will be just staying either in Salesforce or either in Marketo. So yeah, definitely, if you limit the number of records syncing back and forth, it will definitely help you improving your Marketo integration. But that's not it, right? If you have limited the records, but you are syncing too many fields, right? Even though those fields doesn't really need to be synced with Marketo. Like for example, you have created so many formula fields in Salesforce. It doesn't really make sense to syncing those fields to Marketo, or maybe you have created some calculated fields or some fields that is just important for reporting purpose within Salesforce. Why do you need those in Marketo? So if you really need to streamline your Salesforce sync, you have to limit the number of fields as well. So for that, what you can do is you can go to your Marketo admin section, export all the fields that are in sync, and review which one doesn't really need to be in sync. And after that, you can go in your Salesforce and just remove those field visibility from a Marketo user. And at the same time, you can come back in Marketo and hide those fields from users' visibility. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is limiting the number of objects. So if you are syncing custom objects and you are syncing everything, then again, it will hamper your Marketo and Salesforce sync. So be mindful when you are syncing those custom objects, and just sync only the custom objects that you really need for your segmentation purpose, or for your email scripting, etc. So limit that as well. Fourth one is limiting the number of mass updates. So I've been working with one of the customer, and they had over 2.5 million database, and what was happening is they needed to update one field every quarter to define the segment, right? They were using some product data and some other data, and they were calculating that segment outside Marketo and updating that data back in Marketo. So updating 2.5 million records every time, it was too much for the sync to handle, right? So if you are doing that, try to limit it. If you really need to do it, then do it in batches. Smaller batches, instead of uploading 2.5 million or millions of data in one go. Do it in small batches. And at the same time, what you can do is you can ask Marketo support to enable multi-batch queue for the sync. So what happens is that you can have additional queues that is syncing your data from Marketo to Salesforce. So the mass update that you did will be syncing in a separate queue, and your daily updates, your MQLs and everything will be syncing through a separate queue. So both of those things will be syncing simultaneously in parallel, and you don't really have to wait for hours or days to sync your really qualified leads to sales and have them followed up with them. Yeah, so let's take a look on how these things will can help you out, right? So definitely, if you do it, it will reduce the frequency of sync backlog from 12 hours or maybe 2 to 3 days long to almost none. You will see that that change there. Reduce the frequency of SFDC error. So if you're syncing too much data from Marketo, you see, if you're syncing the fields that are really not meant to be syncing to Salesforce, and there are certain validation errors at Salesforce end, you will see those errors. even though it doesn't really matter for you. And at the same time, sometimes if you're syncing too much data, CPU utilization and all that stuff affects, errors will be there. So limiting the number of records, limiting the number of fields will help you reduce those SFDC errors at the same time. And then if you enable multi batch queue, and if you're following those steps, you will be able to sync those MQLs in real time with Salesforce instead of waiting for 2-3 days, right? And definitely it will help your sales team to close those leads faster and in kind of real time. And at the same time, you will also gain some team efficiency, moving your team's focus from just looking at why we have this particular SFDC error, or how to really look into the backlog and how to sync these MQLs in real time. Instead of having your team focused on that, you can have your team focused on more strategic planning and things. So yeah, these are some tips. I hope it will help. But if you have any question, if you need more details, always happy to have a chat offline as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I know we had some questions coming in through the chat. Definitely feel free to go off of mute if you want to ask the question live, and we will go ahead and stop the recording now. So